Hey fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. And first of all, Merry Christmas to you who celebrate Christmas and happy holidays and so on. This podcast was actually not my idea, but Dennis Fabian's idea after the podcast we did together. If you haven't listened to that one, please do. It's available on iTunes, Spotify, and pretty much everywhere where you listen to podcasts, and also YouTube, of course. But he came with the idea that we should do another one, but include Richard Parnell, a stringing guru. I've talked to him before on this channel, but this was maybe 2 years ago or something. The sound was not great. I've improved somewhat the tech part of my work, partly thanks to you and your tips. So I wanted to invite Richard. Richard is very knowledgeable. He's strung for pretty much all the pro players you can think of at any Grand Slam and so on. He's such a legend in the stringing industry, and he has his own knot named after him. So that's pretty badass, and very fun guy to talk to. So we dove into a bunch of different topics in this podcast. We did it over Zoom, and we talked about everything from what Corentin Moutet is going to switch to Manarino's tension and other players with low tensions. We talked about how to create a good stringing team during a Grand Slam, for example, how stringers can improve, and if recreational players can get too obsessed with gear, and what pro players are obsessed with gear, and so on. So a bunch of stuff to dive into if you're into this stuff, which I hope you are if you're watching Tennis Nerd. I also invite you to write some questions in the comments, and we're going to do another one of these maybe in a month or two and dive into your questions. So put them below or on the post on tennisnerd.net for this podcast. Well, that's pretty much it. Let's dive straight into it. Thanks to Richard and Dennis for talking to me. And if you have other ideas for guests you want to see and listen to on the podcast, let me know. I've edited this version a little bit, the full length over an hour long. So I felt like I needed to do a bit of a shorter version. It's still 30 minutes long, but this could be part one. Maybe I do a part two as well. But you can listen to the full podcast on Spotify and the website tennisnerd.net and so on. If you want to support the work I do, please support me on patreon.com/tennisnerd or check out my affiliates. The links are in the descriptions. That's pretty much it. Let's listen to what the guys have to say. Have a nice day and a Merry Christmas, and don't forget to play some tennis. Turning 40 in February, so
40.
Yeah.
Holy hell, young gun.
Young gun.
Yeah,
I thought you were younger than me, no?
Me?
Yeah.
I love your humor.
Okay.
I'm turning 44 in June.
You look young.
Oh, Dennis, you don't look a day over 44.
No, exactly.
Oh, Richard, such a sweetheart. That's why I wanted to have this call.
I mean, talking of Manarino, I was stringing for him at Wimbledon. I tend to string for him. I think I did him this year. I didn't do him last year because there wasn't Wimbledon, but the year before I did it. And it just happened that there were so many people giving me players that were using sub 20 tensions.
Yeah.
That, I mean, he was down at 11 or 12, whatever it was. And then there was Kukushkin, who was down at 11.8 and 12.2 or whatever it was. And
written with his pencil on the
that's the one, right? on the white over grip, yeah. And then and looking around to make sure it's the same stringer, same machine.
Yeah.
And because I don't normally do Kukushkin, it just happened that the day before I got to Wimbledon, another stringer had gone on my machine and strung his rackets on that machine. So then the next day, when I arrived, I go, the other stringer gets off my machine, I go on my machine, and Kukushkin, when he looked around the corner to see, giving his rackets, he said, "That's not the same guy." And they said, "Okay, well, it's your choice. You can either have the same stringer on a different machine or a new stringer on that machine." So he said, "I don't know, I want him on that. I want that machine." So I had to look after Kukushkin. And I think one of the rackets I was doing was, I think it was 10.8 and the other was 11.2. And the strangest thing, I actually got a different DT between the 10.8 and the 11.2.
Oh, wow.
So it was.
Do you remember the DT figure?
No, it was low 20s. It was, I don't know, 20 low. I mean, I don't know, 20.
Yeah,
20,
exactly. That's
that sort of thing. It was right down there. but I actually managed to get a reading. Manarino, I don't think you can't get a reading. It's too low.
Yeah.
And
Doesn't go down that.
it's tough to string actually, right? Like
It's much harder.
Manarino is okay because it's a 1619, but like Kukushkin is I think 1820, and in my like I feel like the 1820 on that super low tension is like even worse to string, like with
Well, you have to get it absolutely perfectly straight away, because otherwise you can't. If you start moving it afterwards, then you really do have problems where you start getting wavy strings. And it's also, if you get a natural gut, if you're using a natural gut in a soft one, the natural gut gets, like, let's not say a dent in it, but it gets a mark where the string is on. So then if you try and move it afterwards, it always snaps back to where it was, where you left it. So you have to make sure that it is absolutely straight or absolutely in the position you want. Otherwise, it is an absolute nightmare. So I mean, it's much easier to string a racket at 30 kilos than at 10. Much easier.
But like Manarino is also pretty funny because first of all, he's a super nice guy when he comes in the string room, very respectful, like at least how I got to know him. But he's always keen on like measuring his rackets in terms of the swing weight and balance and stuff. Yeah. So this year in Indian Wells, we put first time in the front room, we put the 3-in-1 machine kind of like to showcase it and to give players who just want to test it or like want to see their rackets, they could do it by themselves. So we didn't need to take any stringers time to just measure rackets because they can do it easily. Yep. And like I was telling our front office people, I said, like, I'm going to make a bet. I said, the first player who's actually going to move actively to the 3-in-1 machine is going to be Manarino. And like it took, I mean, chances are like relatively low that it's actually going to happen because you don't know when they are coming in. But like literally 2 hours later, who walked in? Manarino walked in, dropped off his rackets, turned around, saw the 3-in-1 and asked like, is it okay? Can I check? I'm like, sure, yeah, feel free. And like the group was laughing, and then he asked me and said like, why like kind of why laughing? And I said like, sorry to say, but like I was kind of expecting, because you did it to me in like in Madrid, in Paris, like wherever I see you check your rackets. Yeah, like I know I'm super picky and blah blah. So
no, he told me he was very specific. He couldn't even like think of playing with another setup. You know, it's just like that's what he can play. Especially if you have that kind of super specific, low tension, high power frame. I mean, you don't have many other ways to go. You know, you're stuck in this very extreme corner of specs.
It's again something that we like what I experience, at least in my little world of playing tennis and kind of doing development stuff and things and working with players for the past, I don't know how many years, not anymore as much for sure ahead as I did with Prince, but I realized on my own as well that if you play a stiffer frame, like especially a frame that's stiffer in the hoop stiffness, not overall like I know everyone is in this RA camp thing, which I'm like not a huge fan. Like that, if you have a lower tension setup or a softer string with it, like it's so much more convenient to play with the racket, and you get such a nice impact feel and sound and the trajectory of the ball compared to like a stiff racket with a stiff string and high tension. It's like it's a completely different world. And like you can actually, even if you do play testing and stuff with people and you ask them, what do you prefer from a sound perspective, from like impact feel and stuff, you can guide them much easier through what they actually need or should play. And then the other thing is always like what they believe they hear, what like the coaches or the coach may have heard from somebody that his, there's always the pure technical statistic data kind of thing. And then there is the player's perception where never ever you can tell somebody what he's going to feel like.
Yeah. I mean, the sound is very subjective as well.
Sure.
Because I mean, there was it Corentin Moutet, the French player, was down here and he was trying different frames, and he was trying with Alu and Guts and Alu and 4G. So he was trying a few different things. and he was hitting with he picked up a Yonex racket, and he put in his usual setup, which is alu both ways. And he said, "Oh, I love the sound." And that was, as soon as he hit it, he said, "Oh, great sound." And that was one of the first things he picked up on. And he's looking to change anyway. So without saying where he's going to, I'll just say he loved that racket. And and the first thing he actually said was, "I love the sound."
Yeah.
But I mean, sound is connected to so many things. Like you can connect sound to like the speed of the ball, to the impact feel in general. Like so the reference is like a variety of things for so many players. And like we know it from cars, you know, like those crazy people who customize their cars, they might have a small engine but a loud exhaust, and you believe like, oh my god, this car must be fast or something, and then you actually see it and you're like, no, it's probably not going to be fast.
As a Fiat Panda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like remember the sound that was so like unique for one of our, like, was a Prestige Classic, that the sound to the cap grommets, which a lot of traditionalists and fans, they still love and would love to see it coming back and things.
Yeah. No, that's one of the ones I get from a lot of people as well, like that sound of that racket. And people like it's kind of this first love thing with setups. Like if you try something and you have that feeling that Corentin had, for example, I think it's almost hard to look away from. It's like this, oh, you know, I'm in love now. I can't play with anything else. Just this fantastic.
We as brands probably even talk not enough about it, about the sound and what the sound does to you, basically. That's also a reason why most players, they don't like to play test new rackets or new setups within indoor courts, because you always get a complete different impression than outside.
Sound is amazing. I mean, recording something indoors, it sounds like you're hitting at the speed of light, you know, and then you go out and it's like, okay, it's normal, you know. Do you think players are getting pickier now that there's so much information around strings and tensions?
The thing that's probably made the life more difficult for stringers was the ERT 300 and most players having them, because then they would come in, and then if the stringer hadn't done, let's say here, what he should have done, or wasn't constant in his work, then the players can actually have a number there and turn around and say, you know, this isn't right. So in that way, it's good, because it means that the stringers have to up their game. They have to be of the right quality to be able to give that service. And the players now have a way of knowing, well, this isn't how I like it, which is good and it's bad, because one, the player has to know how to use the ERT 300. So he has to put it in the right place. And if you put it in a different place, that the person who's taking it, you'll get a different number. So there's that. Then I actually had a player's mother come in and say, I asked you for 17 kilos and you've given me 18. Because what she'd done is she'd done the ERT 300, then gone to the wheel, put in the 32 or the 31, whatever it was, and said, oh, that's 18 kilos, but I only asked for 17. Well, I always get a high DT when I'm stringing. So I actually had to, and I mean, this is a player who was, I don't know, top 10. And I actually had to explain to her, well, each stringer is different, and the ERT 300 is good for what it does, and it gives you a number, which then we can work upwards or downwards, because each stringer is different, each machine is different. So if I get 32 at 17 kilos or 28, whatever it is, it makes no difference. Then if you want a slightly different DT, just give me the DT, and then I'll work on the reference tension on the machine to give you that DT. And we had it when in Hamburg with Dennis, when with the team, there was a German player. Is it Lentz or
it was Julian? Yeah,
he came in and he wanted, I believe he wanted 36 DT or 37, and it was basically I had to get if it was, I think it was 36. I had to get 37 when it came off the machine. So an hour later it was 36, and then it was fine. But I could get that with a kilo less. So I was actually, before he'd been having his racket strung at 24, 23, I could get it at 23, 22, just because I get a higher DT because I make sure that all the strings, well, I make sure that the tension head bites earlier, and I make sure that the strings are as straight as possible when they're being tensioned. And also I don't move them around afterwards because they're normally in their place, so I don't have to straighten them, which all means that you get a higher DT. But he was working, he wanted a specific DT. So the first racket, I think I got it slightly high. So then we just cut that one out. So all it cost him was a string job and a set of string. And then we knew what his setup was, as long as it was me stringing it on that machine. So
yeah, but to also like come from my side of things, when you talk about like, did it get better, did it get worse, I think it's let's say it changed. Like I can't even say if it's got worse or better. It changed for multiple reasons, and with everything, with every information, it's kind of like, how do you use the information that you get? How do you use the tools that are available? And there are people that buy certain tools, but they don't really know what they do. So like, perfect example, what Richard says, like the ERT, like this conversion wheel that you got in the packaging doesn't really give you the true tension and stuff. So like in the meantime, you have players, they come in and tell you like, I want 35, and you, if you are experienced enough, you know that if you give it to this person, or if you string it on that particular machine, if you have that kind of string, you need to go with whatever, 24 kilos or 23. So that's definitely where an experienced stringer within a stringing service is always super helpful. So if we set up teams for the stringing services, we don't do this normally just from HQ side in every country. Usually the countries have the responsibilities, and I'm there kind of helping them and be their advice. And what I am personally expecting in my role for head, because like it's not self-centered around Dennis being the one who has to tell what needs to be done. It's kind of like, so what do we want to implement as head in the stringing service? You always make sure that you try to have at least 1 or 2 experienced people there, no matter where they are from or whatsoever. But you try this, because that always helps. Because I think what's because you mentioned like the stringing teams and the stringers and stuff. To me, it's a period of time where you are very close with people. And it's for some people it's kind of even intimidating, or like it's different. It's different if you string 30 rackets in your shop, you're on your own, you can move away from your machine as much as you want, you have the TV running maybe and whatsoever, or you are with 12 13 people in a trailer in Indian Wells. Outside it's 45 degrees, you see the players walking in, you see the work piling up, like really piling up. It does something to a lot of people. Like you see people that are amazing stringers, but they can't handle the situation, which doesn't make them a bad stringer. It's just the environment that so you need to know the people that you are inviting, and you need to have a base. It's like a soccer team where when every coach talks, this is my axis, or this is the core of my team. And that's what you need within a big group of stringers.
If we can raise the level of stringers worldwide, I think that's a big benefit generally.
One of the most popular wordings, sentences, sayings that we get in all workshops and also in all symposiums, or if I visit smaller retailers in the past and now, is like, oh, I do this since 20 years. That's kind of a barrier that those stringers set for themselves. I'm like, how do you go against it? So you can't go immediate into confrontation of like, okay, what you've done the past 20 years has been not good, obviously, because of those reasons. And that's kind of where it's so much fun at those workshops. If you get that kind of statement, then how do you react? So you try to get to open those people's minds and to kind of like, yeah, like we are not saying that you are bad just because we show you something different. We show what we believe is the right thing. We have a certain level of experience on the product side, on the stringer side. And that's where we see where we have made best experience, where we have the best results. And that's why we show the way how we do it. It's up to you to pick what you want to pick out of it. Like we
In
don't
a way,
say we don't preach the law, let's say,
No.
like this of string. We can only talk from our experience in all categories.
We make people aware that there's more.
Yeah.
That there is more to it. It's basically it's making stringers aware of what else there is. So yeah, you get certain club stringers who are making mistakes because they're not really aware of the other options that they have. So if we always work towards that goal, which is showing the options that are also there and the reasons for them, and I think that's one of the important things is when you explain why a certain technique or this is the way to do it, you explain why, because most people don't know the why. And if we do a certain technique, or we use a certain technique, or we do a certain thing with a string, or with however we do whatever is included in our technique, there's always a reason why, but most people don't actually give that. So in the workshops, that's one of the things that we try and do, is not just preach and say, this is how you're going to do it. It's this is what we're doing, and this is the reason why we're doing. Because once people understand the reason, then normally exactly what Dennis said, where, well, I've been doing it for 20 years and I've never had a problem. Then suddenly they themselves realize, hey, maybe I need to look at that, and maybe I need to change it, even though I've been doing it for 20 years. Because I always find also when I give workshops, not the ones with Dennis, but the private ones where it's either I'm giving a personal class or I'm giving one of the ERSA workshops, I always, in a group of 6, there's normally one stringer who pushes back. When I say it's this, and they push back. I mean, I remember this one actually was, he said, yeah, when I string the racket, then I check it, and an hour later it's got tighter. I said, okay. Or yeah, I string it at 24, but then put it in there and then it's at 25. So I said, well, actually, I said, all string tension loses tension. No, it doesn't. Well, when you get that straight from the beginning, and this is one that I remember, and it must be about, I don't know, it must be about 10 years ago, and I still remember it. And this was right at the beginning of the workshop, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to say anything, because just what we're going to explain afterwards is going to make the person realize that there's no possible way it can be getting tighter afterwards. So I said, yep, okay, fine, and just carried on. And then once after about 2 hours, when we've been looking at string and elongation and all the rest of it, then he actually came back and said, oh, right, okay, so all string loses tension, does it? Yeah. And I think he was using one of those smartphone apps.
I got a question into my head, which is something to discuss. Maybe it's like, can rec players be too into the gear? Can they be too specific with tensions, with rackets, with so on? What do you think there? Like they get a bit crazy.
Well, people can always get crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, there always are. We get the ones where, well, the logo, we want a light painting of the logo. Well, if you think about it, why not?
Because it makes sense.
It does make sense, because if the player has a string that he wants snapback on and he wants it to move, if you stick big dollops of painting the logo on there, what are you in effect doing? You're sticking that string slightly. So, is it wrong? No. I mean, the logo, can it be the 5th one down and opposite to the butt cap? Hey, if that's what floats their boat, hey, why not? If that makes them happy when they go on the court, well, hey, I remember there was a player who said, I need the knots in the right place because I'm already nervous enough as it is. I'm already stressed going out on court at Wimbledon or wherever it is, that if I see something strange on my racket or something that it shouldn't be there, it takes I'm already stressed, so I don't want to be more stressed. So that particular player had to have his knots exactly in the places that he liked, with all the tails cut to neatly done, And I mean, I there was a player who kicked back his rackets because the knots were all over the place. I mean, obviously, knots is something that I do really concentrate on. I sometimes get called Mr. Knots, but
Exactly. Or you have your own knot, so I guess yeah.
well, there is that. But I mean, players who kick rackets back because the knots are all over the place. There's one facing one way, one facing the other way. Well, if you're doing everything else to make them absolutely identical, so that when you put the rackets, so obviously we always put the rackets in with the logo up, knots in the same place, starting it, so everything is identical. So when you put the 5 or 10 rackets, whatever it is, next to each other, they're exactly identical.
That's, I think, the secret sauce. That's the secret sauce of high quality stringing. And that's where, like, what we try to accomplish during those workshops is as well that we try to make like shop owners, stringers sensitive for how can you differentiate yourself from that black market stringer, from that guy that charges 10 euros and you charge 15 euros. It's not only the argument that you have to pay your rent for your shop, that you actually play like have all the inventory that you manage and whatever other reason you get the better machine, but it's also the consistent quality. Like the rackets always look the same, you get always the same quality, the logos are stenciled, maybe you put a free overgrip on it and it's calculated within the cost of your racket. You got it, you just get it the racket cleaned before you start stringing. That's the little things that don't take a lot of time, but they make the difference. That's what also makes you a better stringer. It's not only the stringer, it's everything around that racket, that you handle it professional and that you take the 12, 13-year-old junior the same way serious as your super rich guy that every club has, that like just wants to like everyone is the same when they drop off the rackets. That's always how I dealt with my customers in my little shop. And it actually, like, the word of mouth can do so many things to you in your area. It's crazy. Like, it's crazy what it can do to you. And as Richard said, like the logo painting, coming back to stringing services, like it's a position where when you are not experienced and you just look into a stringing room and you see that one guy who cuts out the string and paints the logos, some people believe, and it's very unfortunate, that like, yeah, maybe he's not a stringer or he can't do this and that. It's the same way a responsible job within the whole process of stringing as everyone else there. Because as Richard says, like if the logo is painted like with thick paint on it and the rackets get sturdy and all that stuff, it will come back to you as bad quality. The players will rate the service badly because they look at the racket and they have more paint on their racket than on their string. And perfectly from the technical side, we need to go light with it because spin is so important in today's game. So if you have a natural gut monofilament hybrid, the paint gets into the string on the multi or natural gut, while on the poly it just stays on the surface, nature of the beast of the material. So that gets nearly glued together, while there's already less friction between those. And perfect example is Nishikori. He's super picky with it. In some stringing services, I actually saw that he paints a logo by himself because he wasn't happy because they couldn't get it done. And it's not because he wants to be something special, but he's a very sensitive player, the way he plays, the way he hits, and he believes he feels it. So it's rightfully so that he wants to control the things he can control.
This goes back to marginal gains, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
He improves everything in a certain way, and that is the marginal gains part of it.
And coming back to your question, maybe can recreational players go crazy? I think yes, they can, but like in a sense, what I experience in my shop is that there are people out there like, oh, this is only for the pros. If you talk about racket customization, this is only for the pros. That's not important for me. I don't feel the difference. And what I tell also at the workshops, we tell people like, try it with your customer. They will feel certain things. So I had a customer that came in and he dropped off. He had 4 of the same rackets back then. He had always natural gut, and he dropped off all 4 rackets every single time. He only did twice once I started realizing with me. And I was like, why do you give me all 4 rackets and only one is played all the time? Yeah, I want them all the same. So if something happens, blah, and like, but like, why are you only playing with this particular one? Like, there must be a reason for you. That was kind of when I started also getting more into this. And I measured the rackets on the back then on the Prince RDC machine, and they were all different in swing weight. And so I asked him, I said, like, do you also feel, have you ever tried the other rackets or whatsoever? And he's like, yeah. And I said, like, here is the reason why. And I said, like, I can make them all the same for you, and then you can restring once the string is broken or when you actually have the feeling. And that brought me so many more customers because he had the feeling I'm very honest with him. I told him that I basically refused the business of restringing 4 times natural gut because I wanted to explain to him why it doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, it took maybe 3 string drops away on my cash account, let's say, but it brought me 5 more customers, and I had a lifelong customer with him, basically. And coming back to that, it is important for recreational players. Customizing is not only for pros. For pros, it is in a sense, okay, I have a racket X and I want 20 grams more. I want a lower balance. They know what they want. You need to adjust to their game. But customizing starts with matching the rackets actually in your bag, because there is this kind of thing which is production tolerances, and production tolerances starts already that you wrap your grip. Somebody pulls it more, somebody pulls it less. Can be 2-3 grams difference. You already have a difference in balance, and some people feel it more, some people feel it less. It's also something I can't tell. I can't tell you that you don't feel it. If you tell me you feel it and I can measure it, then there is a problem. So let's fix it. And that's also where shop owners can do incredible well offerings to their customers by using the 3-in-1 machine, by kind of measuring it and getting people more sensitive about it. But only do this as a shop owner on things that you can actually change. And that's also the reason why I'm not the biggest fan of all this RA discussion that's always going on.